The Dream Mastery was introduced in the first Titan Quest add-on, Immortal Throne. Back in the days it was very powerful, but the Dream Mastery was nerfed with the release of the Anniversary Edition. Powerful or not, that is not the question here. The question is, how fast is it? And to answer that question, the first thing to look at is reliable damage, ideally dealt to multiple enemies at the same time. The Psionic Touch procs with every 4th attack, bad, deals vitality damage, horrible against undead, and only hits one enemy, atrocious. So, the Distortion Wave is our attack of choice. It deals flat physical damage and is quite good in the early stages. We got off to a great start. We get Grease of Travel with 9% movement speed and an Aegis of Laconia from the Shaman in Helos. The Aegis doesn't really help, but it gives some good money. In Sparta we buy a Knife of Destruction for 14% more physical damage, which also affects the damage of the Distortion Wave. But the damage that we have right now is not enough to kill Nessus quickly, so we skip that fight for now. And just before Tegea we find a Staff of Thunder with 6% electrical burn damage, which just might be used later. Then we go back to Sparta at level 5, and where there was no shrine the first time, we now find a battle marker. This means that we are now powerful enough to take out Nessus quite quickly. The center goes down after 4 distortion waves, we get our next skill point as a reward and use it to max out the distortion wave. Just before Megara we find our first Hermes Sandal, so we are now at 14% movement speed. Then in Old Eleusis we find the Hunting Hatchet of Destruction, which also boosts physical damage and is a ranged weapon, which I always prefer because this allows us to use the Scroll of Arcane Power. Even better, we get an Essence of Zeus' Thunderbolt at the Halcyon Coast, which gives some flat lightning damage and also boosts our electrical burn damage. Our strategy at this point is to use the Distortion Wave as much as possible to get to a reasonable amount of experience. For that, we run through multiple enemies, wait for them to align, and then kill them with a Distortion Wave. Unfortunately, the strategy doesn't exactly work before Ambrossos, where we collect our first death. I misclicked, stopped running for a second, and the centaurs with their battle standard knocked me down quite quickly. After collecting the experience from the quests Goods Abandoned and the Master Blacksmith, we find a Gimp Mask before Delphi. It doesn't really do much, but it looks nice. We reach level 9 before the Gorgons, where we would normally be at level 8 with most classes, and unlock the Chaotic Resonance modifier, that lowers the enemy's armor and raises our damage output slightly. We still use a Scroll of Arcane Power to deal a bit more damage. The fight against the Gorgon Sisters is really messy. I managed to lure all 3 of them at the same time, so I have to be a bit more defensive. And after 2 long minutes, we can finally continue. At least we get better boots with 11% movement speed. We are at level 10 as we enter Athens, and this is where we switch into the Psionic Immolation because Alistar, our next opponent, resists physical damage. This means that our best chance to kill him quickly is a combination of the electrical burn damage over time, our staff with the Zeus Thunderbolt, and a Scroll of Arcane Power. Killing Alistar still takes about a minute, but this is much faster than relying on physical damage alone. In Knossos we have enough money to get the Hermes Sandal out of our old boots and into the new ones, so we now run around with 16% bonus movement speed. We reach level 11 in the Labyrinth, which is good for the next fights. Although, to be fair, we have a Scroll of the Breaking Wheel for the Minotaur Lord, which makes this fight rather trivial. Then I get a weird little glitch. I know this is supposed to be glitchless, but trust me, this didn't help at all. I somehow go through the barrier of the Telkine, making me unable to kill the statues. So we have to wait for the Celestial Conduit to break down before we continue. The damage output against the Telkine is very low, so after a fight which took 3 minutes, yes 3, we can finally continue to Act 2. The low damage will be a recurring theme. The Scarab also takes 1.5 minutes at level 12, and the problem is that the Distortion Wave is great against bigger groups of weaker minions, but bad against single targets, which is what we will mostly fight from now on. We kill the Ancient Scorpus with a Blade Trap, then I go for Lucid Dream after the Psionic Immolation is full. The Temporal Flux would raise total speed, but I think my damage is a bigger concern. The Walking Stones are next, and this fight is finally one of the quicker ones, even without a scroll to help. The electrical burn damage works really well against the statues, and we can damage all of them at the same time.
You cannot open the door at this time.
Nehebkau then can't do much against the Scroll of the Breaking Wheel, which is something you've probably seen a few times during these speedruns already. For the fight against Actaios, I bought a Scroll of the Storm Witches. The battle marker also helps at the start of the fight, and we beat the Telkin in just under a minute. Then I unlock the Nightmare with the Hypnotic Gaze for some resistance reduction, which may or may not have been the right decision. I don't know. The Sand Wraith Lord is weak against the Psionic Immolation, so this fight is no problem. I could have kept the Nightmare alive for much longer if I had used the Taunt skill, but the fight was fine even without our one-eyed friend, which I shall now call Nightmaren. The fight against the Chimera is similar. It kills Nightmaren quite quickly, but at least this fight doesn't take forever. This is due to the support of our good old friend Blandru the Blade Trap, who has been a valuable companion for so many speedruns already, and I cannot imagine living without him. Moments later, Blandru dies, but so does the Chimera. We collect some more experience as we can help the caravan in trouble, and at level 16 we finally unlock the Temporal Flux. The quest Lesson in Despair gives even more experience, which might be useful later.
Why did you say forgive me? I fear I may have been in error.
We are still at level 16 for the fight against the Demon Bull. I am a bit careless and die to the Bull's weird dance ability, which is a very stupid mistake and a big time loss. All I had to do was to stay safe, use the Distortion Wave on cooldown and everything would have been fine. But hey, the Dream Mastery is far from being good in the speedrun, so who cares, right? The fight against the Telkin is decent. It takes me over a minute to kill this thing, but we get through it without major issues. At the lower Olympus, the Temporal Flux saves us from the Limoses. We get slow resistance and can run through this group of demons and skeletons, and even get through everything else without having to go back to the main menu. Then we stand before Typhon, and our strategy is, unsurprisingly, hit and run. One regular hit with the Distortion Wave deals about 700 damage, Typhon has roughly 20,000 health. This equates to just under 30 hits, not considering Typhon's natural health regeneration or his Life Leech ability. Speaking of which, the Life Leech hits us 3 times during this fight, healing Typhon for a total of about 2,700 health. So we need 4 more hits. At least we have Nightmaren, who gives us moral support. We can finally step through the portal after 1 hour, 31 minutes and 19 seconds. And I know what you will say now, this run was far from being good. And yes, it had some mistakes, but to be honest, I got a good impression of how well the Dream Mastery performs. Which is not good. The damage falls off significantly in mid-game, and the switch into the Psionic Immolation costs many skill points. 16% equipment movement speed is quite low, so a time under 130 is definitely possible. But speedrunning with the Dream Mastery is not easy, because our damage against single targets is quite low in most cases. Fights take time, but at least leveling is relatively quick. For me, the Dream Mastery sits in C tier. Next up, defense.